Hi, my name's Andrew Traucki, and I've written and directed and produced a bunch of feature films. Well, I went to Macquarie University and did a communications degree, and it was from that time on I was very keen and interested in film. And then I did a whole bunch of things and ended up writing some scripts. But yeah, they've always been in communications and producing and online work and things like that. And then I wrote Blackwater with a friend of mine, and then yeah, that was the kickoff of making features. So I wanted a third film for Traucki's trilogy of terror because I'd already done the Blackwater and the Reef, and I was looking around for another true story because I think they've got more impact, and I couldn't find one, so I started thinking up ideas and just going with it. And I got into this idea of a werewolf sort of shapeshifter thing, and it was going to originally be set in Mexico, and then I started thinking more Australia, and then I went Indonesia. And then yeah, it just grew from there, just this desire to make another scary film, like very location specific, the jungle, because Blackwater is about the swamp and the Reef's obviously about the sea. And yeah, it grew from all that thinking, and that's sort of how it came about. I was really interested in the sort of handheld found footage pseudo-documentary style. Like, it's been around for a while now, and I was wondering how hard it was, and I wanted to give it a shot because I hadn't, it was something new, I hadn't done something like that. And I'm big on coverage. I really like to make sure I get a lot of footage so I can edit. I love being in the edit suite. So that sort of film is totally opposite to that. So it was really out of my depth. It was like it taught me so much doing the jungle because it really is more about choreography and having to run with the shot and going with it. And it was a challenge there. And also funding wise, I didn't want to spend a lot of time in turnaround. I wanted to make my third film quickly. And The Jungle was a small budget film, so I could raise that money pretty quickly without having to go funding bodies and spend years and years trying to raise some money. So yeah, I think writing's a real discipline, and at the moment I'm missing it because I'm not doing it. But I think, when I'm writing a feature, I have to be writing every day. It doesn't really matter if it's at the beginning, the middle, or the end of the day, as long as I do my 1 to 2 hours or whatever a day. I think that's the only way I can do it because, they're such big creatures, 90, 100 pages. It's a daunting task if you just sit there once every weekend and go, I'm going to write this thing. So for me, it's really about getting into a flow, into a rhythm, and making sure that I'm there for the 2 hours every day to just sit there and write. And I'm very structural, so if I can see the beginning, the middle, and the end, I feel more secure. So I like to map out things as much as I can before I sit down to the page and start writing. And yeah, that's kind of my approach. I am very, I guess I am very structuralist in my writing, and so I do like to have a beginning, middle, and end, and then break that down into beats so that I can, because I kind of feel that 90 to 100 pages is a vast ocean that I can easily get lost in. And at least if I have these little place markers on the way, I can find my way through that path. I don't think I'm a natural writer. It's not like words just flow out of me. It's actually quite a struggle sometimes to sit there and actually do this work. And of course, structure is one thing, but then you've got to have wonderful characters because that's what we relate to. It's an emotional journey. I mean, everyone will tell you that film's about emotions, and so you really have to make sure that your characters are working off each other. So it's a real juggling act, but I start with the idea, so that, if the idea doesn't sit with me, like The Reef, I read about that in a book probably 10 years ago because it's about a story about a guy, 3 people who try and swim to safety and a shark starts stalking them, and it just had stayed in my head. Like, it was one of those things that it just stayed in my head. So I thought, well, if it stayed in my head, it's going to stay in other people's heads. I'm pretty average sort of a guy, so I just thought that's a good idea. And so then I went and started to research it, and I found all the reference to the original event and then other shark attacks. I just did a huge amount of research about shark attacks and survival. Actually, there's a great book called Deep Survival, which is all about what you do in a survival situation. And this journalist has documented hundreds of survival moments and why some people live and some people don't. And so I just started to play with that, and I'm always intrigued with what would I do in that sort of survival situation. So it's a great game to play around with your characters going, oh, would they do that, would they do that? And then, so I have a spine, which is I know that they're going to get into trouble, in a very broad sense, get into trouble, have problems, and then get saved, or maybe not. And then it's about how we tell that in a really engaging way through building the tension each time. You've got to build with a great climax, and then also through the character engagement and character relationships. So that's kind of how I approach it, and it's backed up by a lot of research. So, I started off trying to find another true story, and that took me all over the place. And I actually came up with an idea for something under under the city, but I heard the tunnel had just come out, so that idea went. And that's the thing when you're working in genre, a lot of ideas you come up with, they've already been taken, so you just got to be kind of quick about it. But then I just researched a lot about mythologies of werewolves and shape-shifting, and then various cultures, and it's just a huge amount of research. Like also about, when it was set in Mexico, I was researching all about, they've got, I'm not sure they're jaguars, some sort of big animal there that sort of is famed to still be roaming in the lower parts of, it's jaguars, lower parts of North America. And so I did a lot of research about that, and then how you trap them, how you do remote animals. So it's just a huge amount of research that sort of informs the story to try and make it as real as possible. Yeah, so on the jungle, because it's such a different film, it was, like I say, a handheld thing. So in the movie, you know, the camera is the main character. So it was really, we did some rehearsal, we did some tests where we just saw what sort of footage we might be able to get. So we ran around a park just shooting and seeing whether or not that style would work, and just seeing where we could maybe do cuts, because obviously, you know, if it's just a continuous take, it's very hard to choreograph all that accurately. So we were just trying to get a feel for the style of it, yeah. So yeah, originally, you know, I did a lot of investigation to cameras too, and there's so many on the market now, and we were going to go with the 5D, but I just found the ergonomics of it were really, you know, you've got to put a lot of kit on it to make it fluid. So in the end, the cinematographer went with the C100, which is like more of a cinema 5D, which was great. It looked beautiful, and it all went really well, and yeah, we got the shots. In my 3 features, location's been pivotal, really, really important. Like, they're really very location based, and they've all been very difficult. Like, one was in a swamp, one was in the sea, and this one was in a jungle, or you know, a tropical, semi-tropical jungle. So yeah, it was really important to get something that was very authentic. I shot some of it in Indonesia, and then we shot the rest of it up in Byron Bay, in the back of Byron Bay, in what they call the Big Scrub around. Which is this beautiful old, the whole area used to be this, you know, this big beautiful tropical stuff, and then it got cleared for agriculture, but there's still pockets of it left, so yeah, that's where we went to shoot it. My approach is that hopefully by the time we get to roll, the actors have come to understand the character and own it. So I like to do rehearsals and talk a lot about that before anything happens, because I don't want to be trying to discover the actor on set. I kind of want that to be discovered beforehand. So yeah, I mean the character. So I try and get the actors involved as much as possible and do rehearsals. So we did rehearsals, and we, you know, to discover. So it's me handing over the character to the actor, basically. That's the way I go about it, and getting their input, the actors' input, so they understand the character, and so they can feel really comfortable in that character's shoes. And then, you know, on the jungle there were some non-actors who were great. You know, they actually, you know, one of the greatest piece of advice I got told about non-actors is just ask them to listen intently, you know, because that's a lot of acting, is actually listening. And that was really good advice, but they were really good, the non-actors as well. I'd say one of the biggest things is having a good idea and getting it funded. I mean, the shoot is relative, you know, the shoot's 6-7 weeks or 5 weeks in some cases. It's nothing, you know. What is a lot of that journey, you know, which is a several-year journey, is getting the great idea, honing it to a point that people really like it, and getting it out into the marketplace and getting that support to make it. That to me is the biggest hurdle. Once you actually start shooting it, then, you know, assuming the idea is good, then, you know, you should be able to get home. If the idea is no good, well, bad luck. But yeah, so that's in, you know, overall philosophy. In terms of actual films, look, I think the hardest is still probably the Reef, and you know, there we had people treading on something like a stonefish, people getting septic in their foot, because we were in the water for, you know, 4 weeks or something. It was just, people started getting gammy, lots of rashes and horrible things, you know, people getting seasick. So it was just the actual physical conditions of being in water 10 hours a day, you know, it's just not good for the human body. So that was pretty taxing, yeah. So I really love editing. That's, you know, if someone could shoot the film for me and then bring me everything, I'd almost be happy like that. Because I think, you know, editing to me is this amazing art form that, you know, we've had painting and writing and music, but editing is very 20th century. I don't think it's been, well, maybe comics, but, you know, where did editing come from? It's putting 2 shots together, and if you do it right, something new is created. So I have this real love for editing. So it's really important to me, the post process, and I'm very hands-on in the edit. You know, I sit there every day with the editor and we make decisions and, you know, try and make the best film we can, and that's, you know, sometimes it can be just trimming something by a couple of frames, so it's really important to get in there, and you know, I think you can get lost on a long edit, so it's good to, I like having feedback from people, you know, sort of after you've done so you come into the compile and then you do a first edit and maybe getting feedback at that early stage and then more feedback. And you can only do that with people you trust, so you have 4 or 5 people whose opinions you believe in and get them in to have a look and see what they say, because you get very close to the material. It's hard to stay objective. So yeah, that's it. But yeah, I love that. And then on all my films I've used effects. So I kind of, my shtick is to use an effects team that we generate ourselves rather than going to a house, because I get a lot more bang for buck that way, and it's also just more hands-on. You can turn around shots, and these people are just, the people that I've used have been fantastic, so it's really great to use them. So I think post is really, especially in the digital filmmaking realm, is really, really important, because you can bring so much more production value and style to a film if you got the right post pathway. Look, it's always a fantastic feeling when you look back and you go, well, this is just an idea in my head, and I sat down and I actually wrote it, and then I raised the finance, and then we shot it, and now here it is, a film that people watch. So I guess looking back is nice and seeing that whole journey. On the way, there's lots of ups and downs. You have days where you just think that's fantastic, and then other days where it's been raining all day and you haven't got the footage and everyone's muddy and shitty, and yeah, that's what happens. So it's a real ride, I think, making a film. And the thing that is just very sad, I think there's lots of really satisfying parts as you go along. So having a script that you've written is a pretty satisfying thing, and then knowing you're going to production is pretty satisfying, and then every day being on set with those people and the crews and everything. So there's lots of ups, and then the downs are just the hardship of it, which is it's a grind. It really is like a battle sometimes, and you've got to be incredibly organised and determined and keep on going. And yeah, it was mainly funded through, there was a bit from the Regional Film Fund, and I got the offset, and then it was just private money. Look, I think the execution was all fine. If anything, from making The Jungle, I sometimes look at it and think, it could have been a bit more dynamic in the second act. So I sometimes look at that and go, I shouldn't forget the second act. It's it's one of those acts. Everyone tells you it can get tricky in that second act, because. But so sometimes I look back on The Jungle and I think it would have been good to amp that up. But really, The Jungle was a very interesting film once again, because you're trying to. Well, what I was trying to do is make it as truthful as possible. I said people have to look at this and believe it. And so once you take that road, you can't use all the tropes that you usually do for a thriller. So there's no music, there's no double cuts or quick cutting. It's a very, once you say it's going to be truthful, well then all the tricks go out the window, and so you have to try and use just the actual characters and suspense you can build. And that was a real effort and a real, real challenge. So it was, I don't know how much I'd change, except I'd probably tighten up the second act. What happens is the first film you make, you get pigeonholed straight away. So after Blackwater, which, that was the consequence of trying to make a sci-fi film that never got up because the budget was too big and all these sorts of things. So if I'd got that up, I might be the sci-fi guy. But, so Blackwater got up, and then it defined me as what I could take to the market next, So if I'd taken a romantic comedy, people were going, well, who is this guy? But because I took a shark film, they went, yeah, well, let's fund this, So it's kind of almost from day one you start to get defined. But I think, that's a silly thing, because I just love film. I mean, obviously I like thrillers and tension and trying to make that work, but I like comedy, I like science-fi, I like fantasy, I like action. So, it's not like I just want to make horror films or thrillers, but that's just the easiest path for me to follow in terms of getting a film made, was to follow what the market wanted, and they knew me then as a guy who makes thrillers, so that's what I went for. Hannibal Lecter's a perfect example of, the audience going for the monster, and really what you have to do is just make your monster a lesser evil in some context or circumstance. So they can be a monster, and I guess the morality or why they're a monster is also the questionable. So it's all relative, I think. It's relative to their surroundings and their motivation, and also what else. Like, the easiest way to make somebody a monster but less of a monster is if there's a bigger monster, I guess, and they have to team up to beat that bigger monster. So I think you can easily make a monster a good guy as well. Just, I mean, we're all shades of grey. None of us are really black and white. Superman, is a myth, and it's not real, really. And so I think that's perfectly doable. I think it's very hard to be a feature director in Australia that goes from one project to the next. I think most people go overseas. America seems to be the place, or the UK. I just don't think we've got an industry that's of the size that, lets us do that, really. we only make 20 to 30 features a year, and that's very heavily contested. There's a horrible statistic that, you know, first-time directors, only about 85 or 90% of those, 85 or 90% of those never make another feature, like only 10% go on to make a second or third feature, and it drops off every time. So I think it's very hard to sustain yourself an Australian feature film director unless you go overseas or somehow you have help from a bigger player. You know, kids by the time they're 10 have seen hundreds and thousands of films. Everyone seems to be film literate. You can get your hands now on gear that used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't really think so. I think you just got to be interested in film and study it in your own way. I didn't go to film school, and you know, a lot of people directors didn't go to film school. So, you know, film school probably helps you in some ways, but I don't think it's mandatory, no. Right, so I didn't do the typical, I'm going to make a million short or 3 shorts and then make my feature at all. I started off making corporate videos and rock clips and videos and all that sort of stuff. And then the next thing was a thing called Rocky Star, which was an amazing project because it was actually sound that we found down at the archives. It was a radio series from the 50s, and we chopped that up. It was about 12 hours, and we chopped it down to 100 minutes, 5-minute episodes, 20 of them, and then we'd chuck a song into each one that wasn't there originally, so these characters all of a sudden burst into song and then go back to the story. But the most amazing thing was that the actors had to lip sync to this 50s soundtrack, and we shot it in black and white, so it looked really old, but there was something about the editing and everything else that wasn't. So I guess I made 20 of those with my friends, and they were 5 minutes each. You know, it was on SBS and everything, so maybe that was my short film making. But I really have even trouble writing a short film. I'm not a short film guy. Like, I've seen much more long form for some reason. It takes me a while to get going or something. I don't know what it is, but you know, like I did a thing called the ABC of Death, which was 26 directors, each with a letter, had to kill someone, which was, you know, an interesting project. And I got the letter G, and trying to write that script, in the end I just did something which was a one-take thing, you know, because I just went, I can't really write short films. So yeah, that's, no, I didn't start traditionally that way. Look, I think the whole marketing is an incredibly interesting question, because that's what it's about, you know. These American films, whether they're better or not than our films, who knows, but they've got stars in them, and then they have, if it's a $10 million film, they've got a $10 million marketing budget. So we hear about it, we know about it, even if it's not a great film. Whereas our films, they come out and, you know, they've got to be crackingly good to get the right sort of reviews, to get people, and even then people just sort of don't really go because they haven't got the marketing and the push behind them. So I think it's really important that you have a lot of marketing nous about your film and what platform you come out on. Look, I think it still is a pyramid where if you can get the right theatrical release, that trickles down to everything else. But it's much, much harder to do that now because the American films come out, you know, they come out as this event and they have so much money put behind them that they suck up all the attention. So Australian films, I think, are finding it very hard to compete at the box office, and I don't think it's a measure of their quality. I just think it's a measure of marketing and the ability to get it to an audience, you know, through marketing. So I think we have to be innovative. We have to look at video demand. We have to do other things because really the box office is not what it used to be. I'm always writing or trying to scratch up a project because that's just in me. Whether that connects with someone, or I'm not sure. You know, I want to get into, I'm actually quite interested in getting into television and video in that area because I think features is a real, like, you know, the giant battle and then nothing. So, you know, it's a 3-year journey or something, and then at the end of it, you can be, you know, you have to go off to America or something. So I think, you know, a more sustainable approach might be television and film. So I'm starting to sniff around those areas. I think you've just got to be able to do the distance is one tip. So it's not a quick pursuit. Features, they're long, big things, and that takes time. So you've got to have some way of sustaining yourself during that path. I always think it always comes back to the idea and how well it's written. So you might really be keen to get on and do your film, but just make sure that script actually is as strong as it can be, because you only get one shot, and all your mistakes and all your problems with the script are going to be there at the end of the day, unless you somehow miraculously come up with another idea mid-edit or something. So, you know, I think it's really important just not to rush it and to make sure you get your idea really, really set nicely, and you're getting the right sort of feedback. And you'll know, like the script, you know, with Blackwater, because like I say, I'd written other scripts, but Blackwater, I went out to a few people and they said, look, it's a real page turner, you know, and at the budget level that it was, which was fairly low budget, there was less risk attached. So that was something that, you know, I mean, the market has to want it really, I guess. Because you can write the best script in the world, but if it's $100 million and you're a first-time director, you know, you might be able to sell that script off to Hollywood, but no one's probably going to back you. So I guess just be tenacious, keep on going, believe in yourself, and yeah, have a good idea.